Coronavirus is a pandemic amid a pandemic. For refugees, that is, mostly fleeing from war in their countries and have to live with the uncertainty of never returning home and never getting the privilege of a new home. Now, a global health pandemic has thrown all of them in limbo. Not only is their fate uncertain, but their health and their well-being is under threat. This week on Metropole Debrief, we focus on the experiences of refugees with coronavirus. Hello there and welcome to Metropole Debrief. My name is Ndero Oganga. On the 31st of May, a 71-year-old man became the first Rohingya living in the vast refugee camps in Bangladesh to die from coronavirus. The man died while undergoing treatment at the camp's isolation center, said Bimal Chakma, a senior official of the Refugee Relief and Repatriation Commission. The death was in Kutupalong shelter, the biggest refugee camp in the world. The camp is home to roughly 600,000 people. At least 29 Rohingya refugees have tested positive for the virus so far since the first case was detected on the 14th of May in the camps. Officials said 339 tests have been conducted among the refugees so far. Over 15,000 refugees are in quarantine as the number of cases increase. Bangladesh and the United Nations have prepared 7 isolation centers with the capacity to treat more than 700 patients inside the camps. Bangladesh has seen a sharp rise in virus cases in recent weeks, with more than 60,000 infections and approximately 700 deaths nationwide. Health experts now warn that the deadly virus could race through the vast cracked network of bamboo shacks housing almost 1 million refugees who have fled neighboring Myanmar since a military crackdown in 2017.
Imagine then what it would cause in densely crowded refugee camps, community centers filled with civilians in a war zone, displaced people fleeing to informal settlements in places where there is little or no water, no washing facilities, little hygiene, and no healthcare.
The situation is no different in northern Syria. After over 10 years of unending war, medics are working with an almost collapsed health system to provide as much care as they can, no matter how little, to the communities. In Greece, Doctors Without Borders have urged the government to evacuate refugees from overcrowded camps that could act as a catalyst in the spread of COVID-19.
We have one water point for 1,300 people in Moria. We have one toilet for 200 people. And if we ask people today to call the doctor if they have a problem, there is no doctor to call. And if we ask these people today to isolate themselves, there is no space for isolation.
As the panic over COVID-19 spreads across the world, refugees, always uncertain about their future, have been plunged into the deep end of uncertainty. Of importance to them is surviving another day, either from war, hunger, disease, or coronavirus. From Metropole TV, I'm Ndero Oganga. Well, quite some devastating numbers there from the International State of Refugees. But how do the number of refugees look like world over? Now, according to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, there are 70.8 million people world over forcibly displaced, over half of whom are under the age of 18. Now, of this, 41.3 million are internally displaced people. This means there was war in their country and now they do not have a home in their own country, like it happened in Kenya during the 2007-2008 post-election violence. Now, 25.9 million are refugees and 3.5 million people are asylum seekers. These are people that are seeking safety in another country, might be for political reasons. Now, 57% of UNHCR refugees come from 3 countries. Now, what countries are these? Syria has 6.7 million refugees, Afghanistan 2.7 million, and South Sudan 2.3 million refugees. Now, on top of this, 37,000 people a day are forced to flee their home because of conflict. Now, Out of all these refugees, where are they being hosted? Where do they go to seek refuge? About 80% of refugees live in countries neighboring their country of origin. For example, when there's war in South Sudan and people are fleeing, they're likely to come into Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, countries that are near them. Same case with Somalia and even Rwanda. During the genocide, most went to Uganda. While 3.9 million people are stateless, so they do not have a country that they can call home or to live in. Top refugee hosting countries include Germany, 1.1 million refugees, South Sudan, 1.1 million people, Uganda, 1.2 million, Pakistan, 1.4 million, and Turkey, 3.7 million people. Now let's come back home and look at how the refugee situation is like in Kenya. Now in Kenya, majority of refugees are asylum seekers and they originate from Somali, that is 53.7%. Other major nationalities are South Sudan at 24.7%, Congo at 9%, and Ethiopians at 5.8%. Now persons of concerns from other nationalities include Sudan, Rwanda, Eritrea, Burundi, Uganda, and they make up to 6.8% of the total population as at the end of March. Now, what's the number of total refugees living in Kenya? The population stands at 494,585 people. Now, almost half of the refugees in Kenya, that's 44% of the over 400,000, reside in Dadaab camp, 40% in Kakuma, and 16% in urban areas, mainly Nairobi, alongside 18,500 stateless people. Now, we can see 44% of this number is in Dadaab, close to 200,000, 40%, that's another 200,000 in Kakuma. Now, we are living in the era of coronavirus. If one camp holds about 200,000 people, and it's an era where we're being told practice social distance, physical distancing, how do you think the situation is like there? However, with the new reality of COVID that is posing new challenges to already existing challenges to refugees, among them hunger. Now, according to the World Food Programme, 821 million people go to bed hungry every day. Further, 135 million people face risk crisis levels, hunger, or worse. That means they are marching towards the brink of starvation. So let's listen to what WFP says about the state of COVID-19 and how it's affecting refugees with regards to hunger.
But now the World Food Program analysis shows also, due to the coronavirus, that an additional 130 million people could be pushed to the brink of starvation by the end of 2020. That's a total of 265 million people. On any given day now, WFP, we offer a lifeline to about 100 million people, up from about 80 million just a few years ago. This includes about 30 million people who literally depend on us to stay alive. If we can't reach these people with the life-saving assistance they need, our analysis shows that 300,000 people could starve to death every single day over a 3-month period. This does not even include the increase of starvation due to COVID.
Quite sad numbers there, 300,000 people could starve to death. Now, the situation is no different in South Sudan, as many citizens also risk starvation. This is because of 5 years of fighting, and though recently in February they struck a peace deal. Now, according to aid agencies, 6 million people would need food aid this year, that's 2020, with 30% being women and children. Now, the war in South Sudan has forced a third of the population, that's about 4 million people, out of their homes. 200,000 of these displaced people are in United Nations camps around the country, and some in hard to reach areas. Let's listen in to what the situation looks like in that country.
Nowhere else in the world has the level of food insecurity as South Sudan. Last year, we had to feed 5 million people due to fighting and flooding. Already in 2020, we've had locust invasions, and now there is the COVID-19 pandemic, which we predict could almost double the people in acute hunger by the end of 2020 across the world. The only way we can halt this trend is if generous funding for humanitarian crises like the one here in South Sudan continues.
Well, a humanitarian crisis in South Sudan, but hunger is only but a direct challenge facing refugees. Among the indirect challenges they are likely to face as a result of COVID-19 are the new restrictions to mitigate the spread of COVID-19, and it poses a real threat to refugees. For example, lockdown means there's no safe passage for refugees to leave their countries and go to countries where they could be safe, and equally economic hemorrhage for donor countries, because countries like the United States, Germany, France, and even Kenya that are under lockdown, the economy is really struggling, so it means there won't be a lot of donor funds. How does this leave refugees vulnerable? Let's listen in.
Lockdowns, economic recessions are expected to lead to a major loss of income among the working poor. Overseas remittances will also drop sharply. This will hurt countries like Haiti, Nepal, and Somalia, just to name a couple. The loss of tourism receipts will damage countries like Ethiopia, where it accounts for 47% of its total exports. The collapsing oil prices in lower income countries like South Sudan will have an impact significantly, where oil accounts for 98.8% of total exports. And of course, when donor countries' revenues are down, how much impact will this have on life-saving foreign aid?
That face refugees into context. However, in the wake of all this, what is the UNHCR doing to ensure that they can try their level best to keep refugees safe?
We've been working hard with states to ensure that refugees and migrants are included in health responses in particular. And we have added support whenever needed in all the areas that have been mentioned. Basic health care, health supplies, health infrastructures, clean water supply, increase it wherever possible, better hygiene measures, and very important, information campaigns to communities like refugees that are often in very isolated places.
The questions that should be asked is this help reaching those that need it the most? Is it enough? And what more can we do? After the break, we'll be joined by Dana Hughes from the UNHCR to discuss the state of refugees in Kenya, Africa, and world over amid COVID-19. See you shortly.